On today's show, we're joined by friend of the show, Kyle Bukauskas from Sportsnet. You know him as the rinkside reporter with Hockey Night in Canada and co-host of the 32 Thoughts podcast.
Kyle tells us about working alongside Elliot Friedman, why he had the Ottawa Senators not making the playoffs, and more.
On today's Locked On Sens.
This is Brady Tkachuk, and you're listening to the Locked On Senators podcast.
You're Locked On Senators, your daily podcast on the Ottawa Senators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome! You are locked on to the Ottawa Senators, the only daily podcast covering the Sens. On the outskirts of enemy territory, I'm Ross Levitan, alongside Brandon Piller up in the Blue Mountains. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet hits. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. You can also follow us on social media. We're at Sens Central on Twitter, LockedOn.Senators on Instagram. You can find us free and available everywhere you get podcasts, including on YouTube. Today is Thursday, October 31st. And Pillsy, forget Halloween. You know what's really scary? November starts tomorrow.
November is the scariest time if you're an Ottawa Senators fan. But Ross, I will say there are a few different patterns that make you believe that November is going to be better for the Ottawa Senators. We'll start off. The Senators got that elusive fifth win of the season on Tuesday night. We talked about how in years past it's taken them a lot longer to get there, and that's derailed their season. So the fifth win, we've got it. Check. Another good thing. No Sweden trip, no Europe trip, no massive road trip for the Ottawa Senators to have in November, so we don't have to deal with that big issue. And the Ottawa Senators are above 500 heading into November. So although November still gives me the creeps, it makes me shiver, it makes me cower in my Sens pajamas, I'm feeling better about going into November this time around.
November starts with a back-to-back. First game tomorrow night at Madison Square Garden, and then at home on Saturday against the Seattle Kraken. And here's one more piece of positivity for you going into tomorrow's game against an elite New York Rangers team. The Ottawa Senators at Madison Square Garden have a 31-19-2 all-time record. That .615 winning percentage is their sixth best winning percentage at any individual arena. And one of those is in Stockholm, where they're 5-0-1. And three of them are at arenas where they only played once. Two of them, the outdoor games at TD Place Stadium in Ottawa and at the BC Place for the Heritage Classic in 2014. Salt Lake City. Exactly. So in arenas, they've played more than 15 games, let's say. It's their second best points percentage behind, ironically, Long Island. So they love playing in New York as a franchise. The other one is Little Caesars Arena, where they're 7-3-2. That, of course, the new rink of the Detroit Red Wings. So they're going in to what Brady Tkachuk calls the best road rink in the National Hockey League. You think back to his center ice fight with Jacob Trouba, and what gets lost in that is they were controlling the game but not winning at that point. And then Brady ties it in the last minute on a breakaway and then wins it in overtime. So you love to see the captain step up when the lights are brightest. The point streaks on this team are outrageous between Giroux, Stützle, Brady. It feels like everybody is streaking, and hopefully the Senators can turn their enormous win from Tuesday into a streak of their own. One man who was at the game on Tuesday, Kyle Bukauskas. We've got about 40 minutes coming up with him. Great interview. Awesome guy. So let's get to that right now. You're listening to Locked On Senators, your team every day.
Today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Mary J's. You guys know Mary J's is a locally owned cannabis dispensary in the Ottawa area. Three best friends made a life-changing decision to go after their dreams, and with hard work and dedication, they got 4 stores in the Ottawa area. You can check them out at Riverside South, Orleans, Greeley, and Russell. Mary J's offers the best and newest products in the market. They're adding new stuff to the menu every single week to keep it fresh. They got competitive pricing. In fact, guys, they're going to price match any store in Ottawa. That means you're guaranteed to get the best price around when you go to Mary J's. And they've got awesome customer service by having the friendliest bud tenders around. One of the owners, Dashy, is a diehard Sens fan, absolute beauty. He's usually at one of the 4 stores. So go say what up to Dashy, pick his brain about the Sens and all the latest, greatest products that Mary J's has to offer, and check out their website and pick yourself up a loyalty card. It's Mary J's Dispensary.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more at FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Right now, you can bet $5 as a new customer and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. I love taking a look at FanDuel. They always have all sorts of fun futures and different specials that you can bet on. But tonight, I'm going with what we know. And that is that the Senators are great at Madison Square Garden. So I'm looking at tomorrow's game against the New York Rangers, and I'm all over the Ottawa Senators. They're going to be underdogs on the road, and they have to have so much confidence based on the way they played on Tuesday night. So I'm looking at that. I'm on the Sens. I'm on Timmy Overshots on goal. It hit last night, and you're looking for him to continue putting the puck on net. And I'm going to do that over at FanDuel. It is America's #1 sports book. Join FanDuel today, and you can visit them to get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. So go check them out today. It's FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, here he is from Sportsnet, Kyle Bukauskas. All right, we now welcome a very, very special guest back to Locked On Senators for the 4th time. You can find him around the rink reporting on the National Hockey League with Hockey Night in Canada, and now he's the co-host of the ever-popular 32 Thoughts podcast. It's Kyle Bukauskas. Welcome back to the show, fella. How you doing?
Oh, good, boys. Good to see you again. Thank you for having me. How are you guys doing? I imagine pretty good after last night.
We're fantastic after last night's game. Just a casual 8-1 score. And this coming out on Thursday, but we're going to have the vibes as though it was last night as we're recording the morning after an 8-1 win against the St. Louis Blues. Kyle, we're going to get into that, but I always like catching up with the individuals that we have on, and some big news this summer. You take over co-hosting the #1 hockey podcast in Canada. How's the transition been going to add that role onto your resume?
Yeah, if we're being honest, fellas, it's been a lot. There's no two ways about it. As I say, I joke. It's not like I was bored before, doing my job without having the podcast part of the mix there. So it's been an adjustment trying to make all of that work. But man, it's been a lot of fun. Like getting a chance to work with Elliot every week has been, really cool. And it's been eye-opening, how many people listen, how loyal the listeners are. One of my favorite segments that we do on that show is the thought line, where we take, questions or comments from listeners that, they write in or they call in on the voicemail that we have set up there. Cause it's very like the amount of people that write in, where they all come from, like all over the world. And you could just tell that there's a passion for the game there. They're in tune with our pod. It's just been all very humbling, and you got a sense of it, certainly prior to that. I was a loyal listener as much as any, now before co-hosting the thing. But now being in the thick of it, it's certainly a whole different experience altogether. So they say, yeah, it's been an adjustment, just figuring out, okay, now you got the whole league to stay on top of a lot closer every week. But it's also given me a whole brand new perspective for what like you guys do. I mean, geez, I'm exhausted enough doing 2 episodes a week. The grinding that you boys do, and those that do similar things like post game every night all throughout the season and the other episodes throughout. I mean, my goodness, my hat tip to you guys. I appreciated what you guys did before, but it's a different level of respect and understanding now. So yeah, kudos to you guys as well.
Hey, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate that. What's it like working with the NHL's top insider? Like, you're with Elliot Friedman, you're chatting with him. I'm sure before and after the podcast, there's lots of things that are said that maybe you guys didn't get into. Like, is it just wild, the amount of knowledge and contacts and info he has that you're kind of privy to on a daily basis?
It's really, and you got a glimpse of it, the last number of years, just working with him a little more closer, and the times that I would see him on the road at certain points during the season, or when I'd come through Toronto to do games there and he would be at the rink in the morning, or during the playoffs when we'd be on the road together. And yeah, like the amount of things that he's hearing or that someone calls him about that never see the light of day publicly because there's just not enough there to go, okay, I'm comfortable reporting it. But yeah, it's really something, and speaks to, how hard that guy works. It's certainly a choice. Like, there's the amount of time that he has to spend on his phone, and the other things that you miss over the course of the day because of it. But I by all accounts, he seems to have a pretty good grasp on how to balance it all. Like, I know he loves what he does. I don't believe he's one of those guys that's like married to the job and nothing else matters. Like, he's a big family person as well. So that's really admiring to see and to learn from. But it's you come from a TV type background for myself, and when we're coming up with, okay, how do we want to open the show tonight? Like, there's a certain degree of planning, and you want everything to time out nicely because you are constructed to a certain amount of time, and all the different production elements that you want to potentially incorporate. Like, there's a lot of pre-planning there. And now with the pod, certainly there's conversations beforehand of, okay, what do we want to tackle today? What sort of things are worth bringing up? But by and large, it's like, you know what? Like, I remember before the first one, he goes like, let's just start and let's see where we go. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I've never done this before. What
That's
do you mean
how we
just
do
start
our
and we'll
show.
see where we go? Right. But there's a real art and skill to that. Like, it's not simply, winging it, because you want it to all make sense and to flow at the same time. So yeah, it's just like, it's different ways of thinking. And so getting used to that has been, as I say, like a lot of fun, but another adjustment to try to wrap my head around here.
Well, Kyle, you're a master of flow, and I'm not just talking about that quaff on top of your head at 9:30 in the morning here, but also it feels like every topic you're able to just kind of weave through it. So I'm just curious how much prep and script you put into the podcast at all, whether it's changing topics or if it's just off the top of your head.
Yeah, there's certainly, you try to read up on things that, we know we're going to discuss to have, a little bit of perspective on. One of the biggest challenges for me, guys, is like having an opinion on something. Like, as silly as that is to say, my role working rinkside and just reporting for so many years, I had conditioned myself to really, obviously you have judgments and feelings internally, but what you were putting out there, it was very much something from, you're independent of either side, and you're just presenting to whatever your audience is. This is what I was told. This is what I know to be fact. This is the story I want to share with you here now. And there's no other, type of opinion attached to that. So that's been an adjustment too, as we've gone through this, is like, okay, how do I really feel about something? And by no means am I certainly not, well, you've got to have an opinion, so just pick something, because that becomes phony and people can smell that from a mile away. But just having a little more critical thinking on topics where, in the past where you read about something and you kind of go, okay, well, that's interesting. But maybe now you're allowing it to digest a little more and go, okay, how do I really feel about this? Do I agree with it? Do I have any sort of sway one way or another? So that's part of the prep as well. There's no secret that the bulk of the information on the podcast comes from Elliot's side, and we lean on him a lot for that, and that's a big reason why people tune in for it. But I think one of the areas of strength for me is that because I'm on the road every week, I'm at the rink here in Ottawa when the Senators are at home, to see not only them but whoever's coming through town throughout the season. So the ability to have some more FaceTime with players and coaches and whoever you see around the rink, and just to have that perspective of I happened to talk to this person, or I saw this over the weekend. Those little things that I think will be hopefully an interesting part of the show too as we go along here.
Well, you mentioned that now you've got to have an opinion on things on the show. Kyle, we got to get into one of your opinions you had.
I thought it was going to take this long. Yeah,
we wanted to give you a couple softballs, pat you on the back a little,
butter
you up a little. Now we got to talk about this, because Elliot is on the right side of the fence, the infamous Sens in playoff sign. And Kyle, you could have just done it easy. Yeah, I think they're going to make the second wild card spot just to
Mhm.
appease to Sens fans and just to keep your safety in the nation's capital safe and sound. But you went and you had the firm opinion. I don't think they're making playoffs. Would you like to expand on that or maybe change that opinion you
Whoa,
had?
an opportunity.
The floor is yours here.
Hey, it's the line on our podcast that there's no Waffle House here. There's no waffling. So I'm not going to change here.
All right.
But you know what? Here's the thing, gentlemen. As I say, for so many years, I have refrained from, and by the way, I don't care for these types of predictions. I understand why it's part of the whole economy of things, but I'm not a big fan of it. That's number one. Number two, as I say, I've typically kept a lot of my thoughts and opinions to myself because of the nature of my role. Number three, as you know, and you two have lived through it as much as any, but I have sat up in that press box in Ottawa and have watched a lot of bad and meaningless hockey over the last 7 years.
Kyle,
So
it's
all of
almost
those
November,
factors-
dude. It's almost November. We're nervous here.
You're right, exactly. Well, what a big thing for them to get out of October over 500. Like, that's no small feat, but I'm sure we'll get back to that a little later on. So all of those things considered, I just thought, you know what? It's time to shake something up. It's time to shake something up. And as I said on the podcast, and I stand by this with you two gentlemen, happy to be wrong.
Nice.
I still think of 2 years ago, that home and home, or the back-to-back home games against Detroit.
Yep.
And there was like that, 8-day window where it was like, hey, they could actually get back into the race here. It was so enjoyable going to the rink over that small window of time there, as brief
What
as
a
it was,
week,
right?
eh?
Like that Saturday night against Columbus, Chikrin's first home game, and he scores and the building going nuts. It was like, and again, I'm a fan of the game. I'm not a fan of a specific team, but you know, there's just, you feel it when you're walking into the building, when you're like, okay, like this, the outcome really matters more than all the other ones here tonight. And so I would love to experience a little bit more of that here this year.
Well, you know what's hilarious about that too, Kyle? Those 8 days, 5 of them, Pillsy and I were on my bachelor party in Cabo. So to say the vibes were high would be a complete understatement on that one. And I appreciate that the prediction side of it, it's complete guesswork. It's almost like the prospect writers, where you have to have a strong opinion, but the chances of you hitting even 50% of it are completely zero. So the way we handle predictions, and feel free to take some advice from us here, Kyle, is when you're right, you scream it from the rooftops, and when you're wrong, it never happened.
Right. You know what? That's the thing. It's funny because I used to do, because Sportsnet.ca, of course, does the preseason predictions, the amount of things you weigh in on. And I used to partake in that for a couple of years. And the 1 year that ended up being the bubble playoffs in the summer, like before that season, it was like, you know, who do you have in the Stanley Cup final? And I picked Tampa Bay and Dallas. And then they ended up there in the bubble. And I remember Sean Reynolds was there. We were both covering it in Edmonton. And he was like, how did you know that it was? I'm like, I didn't know, Sean. Like, of course I didn't know. Like, there was nothing about that made me feel great. Like, it was just, you know, what were the odds? So yeah, I appreciate the feeling.
Oh, it's awesome. So Kyle, you got to see the game against St. Louis Blues the other night. And with that, the most emphatic win, but it was also the second time this year the Sens have scored 8 goals in a home game, which is incredible in and of itself. What's one storyline so far this season that's capturing your interest with the Sens?
I think this continuous growth in how the top guys play defensively, or I guess just more complete. Not that I want to oversimplify it, but like, especially, you know, we talk about the Colorado game on Sunday night and how difficult it was to watch in that regard. I thought, you know, particularly for, you know, the top line with Brady and Tim, and you know, one of the things I wondered about, and certainly part of it is because they're missing some bodies here, but it's been a bit of a revolving door on the right side for them and trying to find the right mix. But, you know, with Ridley Gregg starting there Tuesday night, and how much of a purpose that line, I mean, everyone was jumping right out of the gate there. But I thought the amount of, you know, shifts in the very beginning, right from the start, where they like had St. Louis hemmed in, And I don't know what was going on with St. Louis Tuesday night. That was, I don't think, anywhere close to what they are capable of, but credit to Ottawa for taking advantage of that, because they just went to work. I mean, Allmark pointing out after the game about Stützle getting back and creating the turnover that he just grabbed and went the other way to make it 3-0 late in the first period. That was one, because, we've heard Travis Green say, like, in his conversations with, particularly his top end guys, over the off season, as he was getting to know everyone, and the amount of them, that took ownership for the fact that they have not been good in that regard in the past. Their ability to recognize that and go, okay, they want to work at it. And Green also alluded to it with Stützle specifically after the game on Tuesday, about that this is someone who really wants to put in the work to be better in that area. It's no secret, in the past, and certainly the team was in a different place, that there was a lot of things that, the top guys were able to get away with. And now we're seeing a bit of shift in thinking and what's acceptable with the new regime, which was what should happen. I don't believe it's something that's going to happen overnight. There's still going to be nights where I'm sure fans are going to be watching and going like, why that decision? But the fact that there's an awareness of that and a willingness to work towards, being more effective in those areas, that's what I'm really interested in seeing, because I mean, we've seen, offensively, they're managing to do quite well in the early going. I mean, the shooting percentage is very good as a team. Is it sustainable? I imagine it comes down a little bit, but at least giving you glimpses that this is a team that can score enough to win most nights. And now it's the other areas of the game. And as the head coach said, that they can be all connected in so many different ways. That's going to be one thing I'm watching.
Now, as far as specific players, Kyle, who's one player whose storyline you're going to be really following along this season for the Ottawa Senators?
Well, I said I think it's tough that he's out right now with an injury, but I think this is the Shane Pinto season of really blossoming into a player on the radar league wide. I think it was I had a couple people with the team even last season, like he was back for maybe a month after the suspension the first half of the year, and they're saying like he's our most dependable not only center but forward that we have. And he's becoming a man now in how he's built and how he carries himself. And it's funny. So we were down. I went to Vegas for the media tour before training camp started, and Pinto was the Senators representative. And so after the first day of doing the car wash, and it's pretty demanding for the players, the amount of different stations they got to go through. And Sportsnet has a number of different areas set up, for interviews are one thing, but also like just the promo shoots and video and all that stuff that they got to go and do some social media things that are a little more on the lighthearted side. And, our group went out for dinner after the first day, and naturally the conversation turns to, okay, which players were good to deal with, which ones, maybe weren't so much into it. And like, I'm not overstating this, guys. Like every person there said that Pinto was the favorite. Like they were like so enamored with his personality, just how he carried himself. He did a bit with Colby Armstrong that'll, on the couch with Colby, that's going to air at some point this season. And Colby joked, he's like, I just want to be his friend. Like he's such a nice guy. So clearly he's got that about him that's very endearing. And with how he plays, I think, he's the guy for me. I think, so long as hopefully he doesn't miss too much more time here, it allows him to really establish himself as one of the more trustworthy forwards in the game.
Hope you're enjoying our conversation with Kyle. We'll get right back to it. But first, Pilsy's got a word from one of our favorite sponsors.
Today's episode is also brought to you by PrizePicks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for your shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with PrizePicks. You guys heard me right. You can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. Best part is you don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks is the best way to win real money this football season. Which players are going off? Which ones aren't? Make your picks in less than 60 seconds and turn your sports opinions into real money all season long on PrizePicks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 when you play $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game.
All right, now back to our conversation with Kyle Bukauskas. Well, the everyday citizens are going to chirp me for telling this for the 50th time, but because you're in the scrums, I want you to set the stopwatch now. Every time Shane Pinto does media, we do a timer of how long it takes him to make himself giggle during the interview, and it's usually usually about 15 to 20 seconds he's able to keep his mouth straight. So it's hilarious that he just feels like the ultimate vibes guy, and you got to think that played a role in kind of the downfall last year where the losing streaks would go from 2 to 5 in the blink of an eye. So feels like him being at least around the team. I know not in the lineup right now, but still good for morale. Same with Josh Norris, which is where I want to take this conversation, because we know the stat when all three of those guys play, they've got such a winning record. I think that the networks have now started to pick up on it, where when you have Norris, Stützle, and Shane Pinto in the lineup, they're 29, 15, and 3 all time. But Josh Norris in particular, going into the season, was the storyline we were focused on the most. Even the conversation, could he start at wing because you don't want him taking faceoffs? Well, he's right over 50% on the season. He's shooting 28%, which some people might say is unsustainable, but I think his career shooting percentage is like 22 at this point. What do you, from being around the group as much as you are, like, is there a noticeable kind of relief from him that he's been able to kind of pick up where he left off before the shoulder injuries?
Yeah, and I try to be careful with that, because it feels like how many times have we been maybe not quite this far down the road, but in a similar situation of like, oh, it must just be nice to finally have that behind him, and then something else creeps up. But to your point, like, there doesn't seem to be any hesitation, right? And I was as nervous as could be. Well, I shouldn't say nervous, but you're just like, your antenna goes up with the fact that he wasn't playing early on in the preseason. You thought, holy smokes, is this, last year all over again? But the fact that how he's come out, and as I say, like, there doesn't look like he's thinking about, what's his past, his injury history. It doesn't seem to be anything in that regard, which is great. Because, the one thing I worried about with how he was being held out of games there in September, Craig Simpson always talks about, like, it's one thing when you're coming back for an injury, particularly something, shoulder or back related, where you're even, if you're doing drills in practice, even if you're doing it at high speed, it's something controlled where you're going, okay, now I'm turning here and this is where I stop and I head back up the ice this way. When you get to a game, that's where the randomness comes in, and you have to do a quick sudden adjustment like that. And if your body's not fully healed, that's where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not as great feeling as I maybe thought I was. But the fact that seems to hasn't been any issue here. I was talking with someone that used to be with the organization not too long ago about him briefly, and there was concern about, like, is he ever going to be able to get back to the player that he once was when he was on track to hit the 40 mark a couple seasons ago, just because of what he's all gone through. But it doesn't seem to be that way here out of the gate, which is really encouraging. He just looks like there's joy in his game. And they've got a good thing going there with how Claude Giroux has fit in with him and Drake, and inevitably there's going to be some interchanging as the season goes along, but at least they've got a bit of runway built up here as a trio to get some good habits and just some good games stacked up one on top of the other, that hopefully for their sake leads to more success throughout the year, and just the ability to know that they can execute at this level.
I think my favorite part about Norris's game, we know he's a shooter, we know he's got offensive talent, but he's third on the team in hits. And then you see in the game against the Blues, he's blocking shots in a 7-1 game on the PK.
Right.
Like, to me, that's that confidence, right?
Penalty kill time too, right? Like the fact that Travis is comfortable putting him out there and as you say, doing it in an effective way. And he seems to be embracing it, and it doesn't seem to be sacrificing things offensively either. I mean, it's just another bonus. And I should mention here quickly, I mean, it's all just anecdotally, but Tuesday night, as we were waiting to go into the room after the game, Shane Pinto walked by us in a suit, smile on, seemed to be in a good mood. couldn't see. I don't know. Like, of course, you never know, but it's not like, he's walking with a brace or he's got his arm in a sling, or, nothing like that. So, I mean, I don't know what that adds to overall, but the fact that he seemed to be in good spirits and obviously happy about the team getting a big win. But seeing that at least was like, all right, there's hopefully for him and the team that a path where it's not too long that he's going to be out for.
Yeah, we're hoping he's back sooner rather than later. Kyle, with you working on 32 Thoughts now and being a ringside reporter, going to a lot of different rinks and different markets around the league, I'm curious if you get a sense of, obviously you live in Ottawa, we're doing a Sens podcast, so we have a very specific view on the Ottawa Senators. I'm curious if you're starting to see a national shift of people's views about the Senators organization, how they play, things like that. Like, does it seem like with this new regime and the new direction and culture they're building, that the rest of the league isn't really looking at Ottawa as kind of that laughable, unfortunate franchise that just has the worst things happen to them? Like, is there a shift happening in your opinion?
Well, I think certainly on the ownership and how the franchise is run, that has definitely been the case. Which is a good thing. But in terms of, the on ice product and the results, I think there's a little bit of wait and see here still, because you remember last season, guys, out of the gate, there were a lot of people that were like, that was their darling pick of the year. That it was like the Senators are making the playoffs. Mike Kelly from Sport Logic, he was at the game last night and talking to him before the game started, and he made the comment that he was one of those guys last year saying
he said it on this show.
Right? That's right,
yeah.
right. He's a friend of the show.
Yeah.
And so he ended up, it didn't turn out that way. So I think because of that, I think there's still just a little bit of hesitation of like, let's see how things play out for a little bit longer. But I do believe, along across the league, there's, as we talked about a bit earlier, like I think for a while there, a lot of the things that, maybe some other coaches felt or other teams felt about Ottawa, that was like, just be patient. Like they're going to beat themselves at some point with some of the decisions that they make that'll cost them. But as we go along here, like, I wonder how much that changes where, you're not just going to be able to wait around for your opportunities against this team, because they're a much better team to play against defensively. That'll be a huge tell, I think.
And it's such a fair comment. And we had Jason Demers on, another kind of outside view, but he covers the league with the NHL Network. And he's like, yeah, we all picked the Sens last year. Him, Mike Rupp, Corey Schneider, all the guys over, Brian Boyle, that do it at NHL Network. And now they're like, hey, prove it to us, and then we'll be on board. So that's kind of the wait and see approach. But sticking around the league, and most specifically the Atlantic Division, because I'm still feeling weird about sorting the standings this early in the season by division.
Yeah.
Usually I'm right into the wild card and just like, okay, how can we do this here? But you got to cover the Bruins-Leafs game last Saturday night. I'm sure you've seen Tampa and Florida in the home opener for Ottawa. Like, which team would you tell Sens fans to maybe take a peek at as like, okay, that's the team that you might be able to catch or leap this year?
Yeah, I mean, Boston is looking a little more vulnerable than I thought. I wonder if too, like, I know it wasn't a perfect marriage all the time, but I wonder if they're having a kind of a reality check of like, maybe it was a little more difficult than they thought in like replacing somebody like Jake DeBrusk. Like I said, it wasn't always a perfect combo there, but I mean, that guy scored and at moments he scored. He went through dry spells as well, but he also scored some big goals and got hot too. And that's of course the name of the game. So trying to figure things out offensively, right? Like they got shut out against Philly at home on Tuesday night. I will say that Saturday game against Toronto was probably one of their better games of the year. And took overtime to get that one across the finish line. I'm wondering as Buffalo's starting to wake up here, where are they at yet? Like which side are they truly? I'm still going to be patient there. I think Florida at this juncture is still very much the class. I've been impressed with how Tampa has come out here after the summer that they had, and how angry that market was that Steven Stamkos left and the fallout from that. But yeah, we'll see. I think, Boston would be the one at this point. The other thing too, is if it is a situation where you're into the wild card, I mean, suddenly, like, Washington looks like a better team than maybe, myself included, thought coming out of the gate here. So some other teams that, I would have guessed coming in maybe wouldn't be as much of a worry if you're going to be hunting one of those two final spots, are doing a pretty good job of banking some points here early on. And as you say, it's still really early to be dissecting the standings here. But those are the teams that kind of come to mind through almost the first month of the season here, Rob.
It's interesting though, Kyle. I only look at the standings the day after the Sens win. I don't happen to look after they lose.
It's weird how that plays out. Hey, yeah, it's funny
weird
how your brain's wired.
Yeah, I just accidentally clicked on the wild card standings, and the Sens are in the second wild card spot, just as I predicted, Kyle.
Yeah.
So that's not too bad at all.
Yeah.
Now, you and Elliot were talking on the 32 Thoughts podcast about Claude Giroux, and Elliot made the point, hey, if I'm the Ottawa Senators, I'm going to him as soon as possible and trying to get something done. Now, I think Sens fans we're trying to be realistic, but also optimistic. I think part of Sens fans are like, no, he's got a family, a growing family here. He wants to be here. And then the other half of Sens fans are like, well, Claude Giroux came to Ottawa because Philly was rebuilding and he wanted to have a chance to win more. And it hasn't gone his way. Now, do you think maybe it's the Sens waiting and seeing, or Giroux waiting and seeing, or where do you think contract talks could be at with the Ottawa Senators and Claude Giroux?
Yeah, I'll freely admit, like, this would be just purely a guess on my point here, but
right.
It wouldn't shock me if both sides are like, let's just see how things go here over the next little bit, right? Because this management staff, this ownership wasn't here when he signed his deal initially. Now, I mean, he's done nothing but deliver. I would say probably even more than they were hoping when he initially came to Ottawa. But as you say, it just hasn't translated to enough team success. I know, like, Michael Andlauer, I think, is a huge fan of him and how, not only, of course, how he plays, but just how he conducts himself, his impact in the room, in and around the rink there as well. I think he's got a big backer in the owner of the team. So if you're hoping for a new contract in the place you're currently playing, that's a pretty good start. So between that and but as you say, like, this is someone that still hasn't won yet and very much is driven to do so. So how this season plays out, I think for him probably, and I don't want to speak for him because I don't know personally how he's thinking, but it would make sense if he's going, well, let's see, really how serious this team is this year, where we're at as the season unfolds. And because I remember, the day that he signed and he said, are we going to make the playoffs next season? Probably not. Like, he was realistic in things very much so when he first came here. But now, as we're getting towards the end of that 3 years, I think it's much more understandable to say, okay, if things aren't on a tangible track where this is something that is going to be better and is going to be in theory sustainable, then because as you say, the off-ice stuff all makes sense between family and being close to where he grew up. I imagine there's a lot of check marks on that front. And now it's like, okay, if the desire is still very much to try to win, and if he thinks it could be possible here, I would not be surprised at all if Ottawa was going, we would love to get something done with you.
Yeah, I think Sens fans would all love to see that done. Maybe right after November. Let's have an above 500 November, which is one of my hot takes going into the season. One of Pilsy's hot takes was Linus Ullmark signing an extension by Christmas. So because of the timing of that, he's got that brand new shiny Linus Ullmark jersey hanging in the case. So he's ready to go. That jersey's 1-0 with a +7 goal differential. So we love to see that. Oh yeah, it's brand new. Nice. Oh yeah, we got the identical matching cases. Finagled a really nice deal there in Leslieville. Yeah, Leslieville in Toronto back in the day. And they open right up. You can swap it in depending on your mood. So it's a real nice play.
This one's staying for a while. I'll just say that.
Well, I was going to say, like, how many different jerseys have come through the cases over the years?
I mostly stick with. I got a fan sent me the old golden Senegoth one. This one.
Has it within arm's reach.
Yeah.
Or Kyle, if you're more a fan, you can put this one up. Or if that's not really your style, you can go with this one too. So we got a couple options for the jerseys, but typically I keep the golden one in there. It's my favorite one, but I thought, all right, I gotta help out the Ottawa Senators. I gotta get Allmark where he needs to be. I'll put his jersey up in there, and look how it's gone.
Yeah, it's gone pretty well.
Been, like everything Allmark related, you have touched has turned to gold, Pilsy.
Well, except for the game in Montreal.
Yeah.
Oh, right. You guys went to that one.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. 15-2-1 though. Boots on the ground, the two of us together. So we're still happy about that.
2 games. That's NHL record worthy.
We're the Pinto Stutzla Norris of
basically
podcasters. Like their impact on the game, our impact on the game, like whatever. It's pretty much a wash, right?
It's equal. It's equal effort. Yeah,
Kyle, we always appreciate you coming on the show. You can always find Kyle on Rogers Sportsnet and the 32 Thoughts podcast. Just a couple final ones for you. I always put Pilsy on the trivia seat, but since you're here, I'll put it to you. We're talking about Claude Giroux. Where in all-time Senators history does Claude Giroux rank in points per game?
Points per game? Okay.
As a member of the Sens, right?
Yeah. Oh, boy. Okay. I will say... 4th?
Very close. He is 6th all time right now. And Tim Stutzla's in 7th, by the way, right behind him. The names ahead of him, kind of hilarious. And one of them is, for the wrong reasons, Matt Duchene is actually ahead of him.
Yeah. Now, is there like a minimum games played filter you put on this, or?
Well, we'll go with 118 games because that's how many Matt Duchene played with the Ottawa Senators. But the others are all there for proper reasons. Danny Heatley, and then 3 captains, Jason Spezza, Alexei Yashin, and Daniel Alfredson. So pretty good company considering he joined the team at age 34. And now you've got a situation where you're just trying to get him over the hump, because as much as fans want to see Brady Tkachuk play in the playoffs, ourselves included, Claude Giroux needs to be back in the playoffs. Just the gamer mentality. I heard Claire Hanna had a great bit based on the Jason Kelsey or the Kelsey Brothers podcast where he made mention, they were talking about which NHL guys could play in the NFL. And they brought up Giroux, and he said that he arm wrestled anyone in the NFL locker room for the Eagles. She said that he's arm wrestled everyone on the Sens, and he's undefeated apparently. Now, I don't know how much is this Giroux just saying that or if it's the case, but certainly he's a fan favorite in Ottawa and had been even before joining the Sens as a hometown guy. Final question for me, Kyle, and we really appreciate your time, as I mentioned here. What's one thing, and this is the most corny question, but you do have such an awesome resume joining Rogers Sportsnet, Hockey Night in Canada at age 20. Like, what would you tell 20-year-old Kyle Bukauskas right now, and what advice would you give him?
Oh, good question. Because I think naturally you hear when, similar questions are asked of people, you're like, oh, I wish I'm
not the first person to ever ask that.
No, I said similar type.
Not as good questions.
Yeah,
exactly. Very good question. Yeah.
Thanks.
But you hear, the answers of, I would tell my younger self, like, just to enjoy it more. And I think about that from time to time. And I go back to, I don't know if you saw, there's a clip from Jerry Seinfeld doing the comedian in Cars with Coffee there when he had Michael Richardson, right? That's the name of the actor that played Kramer. Okay. And they're talking about the show, and Michael's going like, I wish I would have enjoyed it more. And Jerry's going, he said, I could say the same thing, but his line was something to the effect of, but like, we were not doing that for us to enjoy it. It was for the audience to enjoy it, right? And I really do think about that. Like as I've tried to grind my way through this industry and the opportunities I've gotten to work ringside, to interview players, to tell stories. I mean, it's all for the audience that are tuning in for the games and their favorite players. I'm just kind of the window dressing, popping in every now and then, and hopefully at least giving them reason to go, okay, I didn't know I needed to know that, but I'm glad I did, or, oh, that was interesting. I'm glad I didn't press the mute button there for 30 seconds. And so it takes work to try to find information like that, and to try to be, well prepared for whatever you're doing, an interview, to set the scene of wherever you're at. And so I typically, when I'm on the road, like I'm much more default to, I'm going to go back to the hotel room and get some work done. And has there been, opportunities I passed up to go enjoy certain things about cities that we're at, and dinners at nice restaurants, of course. But, looking back, it's hard for me to say that, I wish I would have, gone and enjoyed those things more, and, taken advantage of things like that when I can, because, I think that for me, and not everyone is wired the same, but I just know for myself, like I needed to put that time in to feel, somewhat prepared. I know you never feel fully prepared. That's the one thing you're always chasing. So yeah, I think if there was any advice, it would just be to just, I say, give yourself a bit of levity and a bit of a break from time to time. Because it's never going to be perfect, and that was a good piece of advice I got a few years back, kind of partway along, that perfect is boring, perfection's overrated, and the fact once I got to a place where I could understand that, it certainly allowed me to handle the moments a little bit better, where I didn't do as great of a job as I would have liked, or I didn't word something, or ask a question the way I initially envisioned in my mind, or missed a piece of information that I otherwise wouldn't have liked to. Sometimes that happens, and finding a better way to make sense of all that, and accepting it, that I think just is better for yourself as you kind of live your life and go through it all.
Well said, Kyle. Final question for me. I'll try to be a little more original than Ross with his final question.
I got a great answer. That's a reporter's dream. You just need to get a great answer.
No, I'm just messing with you. All seriousness, though, what's your Stanley Cup final prediction?
Oh gosh! Oh my God! Oh man, that is terrible.
Terrible question, Pilsy.
No, that is funny. I really liked
Ottawa and Winnipeg.
Yeah, right. Yes, the team I picked getting into the playoffs.
I'm not letting you get out of this one, though. I do mean it. What is it? What is your prediction?
He's gonna say Canada versus Sweden.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we had a repeat of the Western Conference final last year. Like if it was, I know Edmonton's getting out of the gate slow here, but Edmonton, Dallas, I can see a Dallas Rangers final.
Ooh, I think was that my
no, you were Dallas, New Jersey, weren't you?
Yeah, I was Dallas, New Jersey. Yeah,
and I was Edmonton, New Jersey.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, like Edmonton's a good, like, kind of the sexy pick this year, as they're getting going. And we
just saw Florida lose in the final and then win the next year. We saw it with Pittsburgh back in the day. True. Like, it just feels like once these elite players, they get a taste of what it could be, they're just on a mission to get that.
One more thing. I don't know if you guys saw, I think it was yesterday, that people announced that you mentioned the Kelsey Brothers podcast, that they were announced the sexiest podcast hosts of 2024. I think you guys got snubbed.
Oh my God.
I said that to my fiance as well. I was like, did they miss the Locked On Senators podcast, or what's going on?
What did she say?
She said probably not.
Yeah, I think it was a quick topic change on that one.
Yeah. Well, I'm in a battle right now trying to get the go ahead, the green light for Movember.
Oh, yes.
A lot tougher than I thought it would be, honestly.
Really, eh? I mean, you're pretty much already there. Like,
she's due in November though, and she's like the first pictures. Pictures we're not gonna have you. I think she's even more worried that I'm gonna be clean shaven and that it happens sooner rather than later than if I have a little something going on. But it's all good. It's hilarious. Hey, we're just trying to follow in your footsteps as being not only one of the most handsome podcasts, but if anybody is having trouble, whether it's a car accident or elsewhere, you can go to Friedman and Bukauskas Injury Lawyers, and you only get paid when you win. So, hey, we really appreciate you, Kyle.
By that.
You're a true friend of the show, and I was just doing some quick math here. You have risen the leaderboard to a tie for 10th on the all-time recurring guest leaderboard. So we appreciate you. It's your fourth and not your final time on the show. We always are watching and listening to you semi-weekly on the 32 Thoughts podcast, and you do a hell of a job. You can tell the preparation that goes in, as you were saying, passing up on those opportunities. It comes across on your broadcast. So we appreciate you taking some time with us this morning, and we look forward to doing this again down the road.
Great. Thanks, boys. I look forward to the 5-Timers Club next time. And that speaks to your longevity as what you guys have been up to. So keep it up. This market's very lucky to have you.
All right, Pilsy. First things first, stick taps to Kyle for joining us. Really fun conversation with him. Just one of the guys that I'd like to have a beer with, much like everyone was saying about Shane Pinto at the NHL Media Tour. Just a great guy. And it is wild that he's already an 11-year vet in the industry, and he's 31 years old.
Yeah, Ross, I remember us at the College of Sports Media. We're aspiring to start our careers, and we see Kyle working, and we're like, wait, how? We're just starting our careers in our mid to late 20s, and this guy's already getting going in his early 20s. Like, it was definitely someone that we looked at and was like, this guy's doing it right.
Best in class. And we're lucky that he's stationed in Stittsville, Ottawa, and he's able to report on the Ottawa Senators. And bringing that to the 32 Thoughts podcast, yes, I think in and of itself is a boom for the Ottawa Senators and their organization to be put on a bit more of a national scale. I know Friedman does cover the Ottawa Senators pretty well compared to other media in the national scope, but awesome to have that representation. A good BC boy that makes Ottawa his home. Pilsy, any final thoughts on today's show?
Yes, final thoughts for me. If you're watching on YouTube, this will be the last you see of my patented beard look, as it's Halloween. November's around the corner. Martian started the Movember initiative between Sens Twitter. Hop on if you want. Donate. Follow along with us. Do your own Movember. This will be interesting. First time I'm going to be clean shaven in years. So we'll be putting the link up. We'll be posting progress pics, all that fun stuff, all in the name of men's health, men's mental health, men's testicular cancer, men's prostate cancer. And it's an important cause, and it's a fun way to help out and be a part of the Sens community.
Absolutely. And for people like me, as you heard in the interview, that the boss is saying maybe not this time. They also, if you join our Movember team, we've got a ability to walk/run 60 kilometers for men's mental health. So that's where I'm going to be taking part and donating as well. Just a great cause. So if you want to be involved, you can go find that link in our bio, and shout out to Martian for organizing that. For today, we say goodbye. Tomorrow, Johnny Lazarus will join the show. He's a New York-based national media guy. Really fun conversation coming up with him. We look forward to that on a game day preview. Ottawa Senators taking on the New York Rangers at MSG. For today, we say goodbye. Thank you to Kyle Bukauskas for joining us. Thank you, citizens, for liking, watching, listening, subscribing, and sharing with friends. For Brandon Piller, I'm Ross Levitan. This has been another edition of the Locked On Senators podcast. Your team every day.